Claire, what give us some insight into policy making under Keir Starmer? How do the nuts and bolts work?
Well, as Nick says, there's quite a developed process in the Labour Party for policy making, which is the National Policy Forum. If you haven't heard of it by now, don't worry, you don't need to. It's done its work for this term. But there is obviously, that's more about how the different stakeholders and parts of the Labour Party can input and some outsiders. The Starmer process is similarly very methodical, actually. So in the early days, much of what we needed to do was to distance ourselves from some of the previous policy. But we partly didn't want to just distance ourselves without having something new to say. Otherwise, it felt like positioning for the sake of it. So it felt probably quite tortuous at the time, but now looks quite efficient, actually, where we went through this process called Stronger Together that party chair Annalisa Dodds led on, which actually enabled us to come up with some of the alternatives to what we'd previously been suggesting, rather than just saying, oh, everything that went before wasn't right. Because actually, some of it we've built on, and some of it we need to distance ourselves from. And then, of course, we've had these Starmer missions, which actually were an innovation from the German Social Democrats. They had these 4 missions for the future in their manifesto, and they still had really like election ready pledges. So they had really bread and butter things that they went to voters with, but it was a way of communicating the scale of the challenges we've got today, but also make the first steps really tangible. So that's been the inspiration really for these missions, and then the first steps on the way. So yeah, under Starmer, a very methodical process, and I think you see the fruits of that today, where you've got actually quite a lot of, I think, quite interesting and quite bold content. But it doesn't feel necessarily like that, because some of it, most of it, we've pretty much heard from him or others already.
How personally involved is he in policy making as a leader? Because some party leaders really get into the details. Others are like, well, that's for other people. I'm, the front man. How interested is he in some of the sort of real detail of energy policy or education policy?
I really liked working for him, and I didn't know him very well before I worked for him, but I found him like a chief executive in actually in good ways, in a successful chief exec, which is they set the vision, they set the culture, and then they appoint people around them who know lots about the subject, and ultimately he would take the political decisions. But he did expect shadow cabinet members and their teams to do a lot of work. He appointed people into those big roles like Wes Streeting and others, who have actually come up with quite a lot of the goods themselves. So he wanted an oversight of everything. He had particular areas he's always going to be interested in, but he wasn't a micromanager. But he is absolutely somebody who will not be chair of the board. He will be chief executive, in that he will want to know about delivery, accountability. That is the sort of experience that I think he's had from being Director of Public Prosecutions. And I think he's taken that into being Leader of the Opposition, and I'm sure he'll take that into being Prime Minister if he gets there.